I don't know that we were conscious of. I certainly had got beyond any kind of evaluation of the second record. It goes on when the record first comes out, and then over a period of time you sort of see how it sits. The second record didn't succeed commercially as well as the first, but I think it drew in a new audience for us. For instance, in England, I think it got really good reviews, where the first album got kind of slated as being some American AOR stuff. The second album actually got well reviewed and well received. So I think we built up a sort of an alternative view of us on that second record. And they work in different timescales and different ways, records. They kind of reveal themselves over a long period of time. Going to do Woodface, I think I was probably feeling pretty positive and excited about it. Certainly the period of writing I did with Tim was at a great period. We're just waiting for the birth of our second son, and that's a great time, I think, when you've got that sense of expectation and kind of puts you in the moment. And I had some good songs standing by for even the first sessions, which we did in LA, and we went over and we holed up in A&M studios. I remember we all had easels, and we all, with the intention of all painting in the studio, discussed it. And in reality, Nick was the only one who actually painted. Mine was there. I think I cut a couple of splashes on there because I was too involved in agonising about the songs. But that was our general philosophy for that album. We were going to paint every day. We holed up in this house in Woodrow Wilson Drive, which had a spectacular spa, I remember. And it was quite a nice modern house in the hills, and we were all in there, and Tim was staying there too. And every morning, Nick was sleeping in the lounge room on a fold-out couch, and every morning Paul would get up and jump into bed with him and expect me to bring them a cup of tea. And it was, and we'd all greet each other with the name Cledwyn. Morning, Cledwyn. That's what I remember about the time.
But the other thing that Nick said, which I thought was interesting, is because most people with groups, they do the record, and then we've gone away from the Beatles thing of every record is going to be a new step, and now people sort of expect each record to be a refinement of this first thing. Whereas he said that Crowded House, used to approach every record as being, how are we going to push the boundaries a bit further? And is that sort of how you thought of the records?
Absolutely, had that mentality, yeah. That was partly what I'd grown up with, because Splendens also had the same outlook on every record. Pushing your envelope. I mean, just finding a new angle on things. You're right, it doesn't seem to be that much part of the modern psyche for musicians. And it's not even mine particularly now either. I'm less interested in originality as time goes on, and more interested in giving people songs they can sing. That's kind of like, it seems to me to be the bottom line in what I do.
But each of the 4 records that you made with that band are very distinct projects,
I think so, yeah.
Quite different attitudes about them.
Well, Woodface to me is two songs too long, there's a couple of weak ones in there I think we could have dispensed with. It's also a slightly strange alliance of different people. Having 2 songs that Ricky Fattar played on alone is kind of odd, is an odd, and people equate it, or a lot of people regard it as our greatest record. That's a matter of opinion. It's actually not my opinion personally, but I like it. I'm not knocking it, but I find the slight the anomalies in the record are what puts me off it a little bit. It doesn't have a sense of cohesion for me, because it came about in different ways and in different manners, and that's what I would question really. But on the other hand, it ended up hanging together. We came back together at the end of this very distinctive periods, the Periscope period and the early period, where some great things came out of that early period, which we haven't really talked about up till now. But Whispers and Moans, we were listening to these back at Woodrow Wilson Drive at nights through the stereo, which was one of those stereos that had a speaker in every room. And it's a pretty bad stereo, but actually the stuff we were recording sounded really good, and we were pretty excited about it. Like, we had 4 seasons in one day, Whispers and Moans. There was a song called Anyone Can Tell, which we were pretty into at the time as well. A version of Fall at Your Feet, although it wasn't the one that we ended up doing. And I know I'm struggling now to think of what the other ones were, but things were going pretty well. We cut quite a few tracks that didn't end up going so well. So maybe one of the problems of that early session was that we had 12 songs, but only 6 of them were any good. And so the other 6 were kind of weighing us down a little bit because we were chasing things, you know, chasing phantoms to some degree. We're a little undercooked in terms of the amount of songs we really needed. We went back to Melbourne after that period thinking, oh, we've just got to do some more work. I've got to come up with a few more songs. You know, so the stage was set really for Tim to emerge, and well, the Finn brothers to emerge to merge. It's Only Natural was his chorus, my verse. That was one of the ones that wasn't really hauled out of thin air. Maybe the bridge was, or the middle 8 was, but it was definitely like, yeah, he had a chorus, and pretty much exactly as it ended up. Maybe a couple of shifting chords here and there, and I had the verse, and they just seemed to go well together. The lyric wasn't fully evolved. We wrote the lyric on the spot, and I think I was we were talking a lot about that time about subatomic particles and all that stuff. It was quarks and that. Well, Tim, you know, we were interested in that. And there's 2 songs around that time. We wrote another one called Strangeness and Charm, which wasn't on the album, but was one of the 12 we wrote at the time. And that was about the name. They were both names of quarks. And that's what we are. And It's Only Natural, the first verse was very much influenced by that conversation as well. Ice will melt, water will boil, you and I can shake off this model coil. You know, it was just that kind of idea of the rubbing together of spirituality and science.
It's kind of weird where songs come from, isn't it?
It's conversations often that sparked those songs with Tim and I anyway. We would just have a conversation about some concept and then we'd make the song based around it. And actually that's unusual in itself because I normally rely on the first idea just pouring out of my mouth before I've even had time to think about it. And then I'll recognise that I'm singing about something that I can relate to and I'll flesh it out. But that's very much my way, is to try not to be conscious about anything for as long as possible. Yeah.
So what about a song like All I Ask?
All I Ask was written in one go, literally for as long as it takes to sing it was as long as it took to write it. And I was just playing a keyboard pad on the keyboard and Tim was singing. And we taped it and then learnt it.
And then you redid it in...
Well, we re-recorded it to make it more fully evolved as an arrangement, but the actual structure of the song, the lyrics, everything was just kind of fell out. Mitchell had a thing about that song where he really liked it, but he thought it was, it didn't quite fully unfold as a song. He thought it was a little, and that was the reason that he suggested putting a very elaborate string arrangement on it. And we went to this guy in Los Angeles, Jorge Calandrelli, who was a guy who had previously done string arrangements for, Nina Simone. And he was one of those old Hollywood cats and worked for, Quincy Jones and various people. And he knew how to do that incredibly, I guess it's syrupy really, Hollywood, lots of dissonance and blue notes and stuff. And we went to him and fashioned it over a week or so. I went and visited him for 3 different sessions and we nutted it out. And that was a highlight of the because we haven't really talked about the last phase of the album, but that happened in the last phase of the album back in LA. And I think we were in Ocean Way. We may have done those strings at Sunset Sound, I can't remember. But we all dressed up in suits the day that we did that and went to the studio looking really smart because we had an orchestra coming. And they all turned up in leisure wear, track pants, and looking really sort of slobby, to be honest. Played beautifully, didn't look like an orchestra.
It's a very spiritual song.
It is, yeah. Well, it's got a Zen kind of Buddhist thing about it, and Tim has always been interested in that, those angles. And to live your life free from the past and in the moment is probably the central truth that any of us can hang on to, really. So that song's definitely in praise of that concept.
There's a lot of religion, there's a lot of references to weather and God in this record.
On Woodface?
Yeah.
God and the weather, well, he's definitely in control of that. I suppose there is. I mean, for people who weren't religious, but we all grew up with it, so it's deeply ingrained in our subconscious is the religious imagery and the idea of man's struggle with God and, you know, His place in the universe and all that stuff. So I think we're good when we delve into that in a slightly open-ended way. I don't think that there's any messagey preaching stuff going on in Woodface, but there's quite a lot of dabbling around the fringes, and certainly the song "There Goes God" is an outright sort of facetious, tongue-in-cheek attempt to explain the concept at the time. For me, was with that song was I saw a guy walking down Chapel Street with a Jesus T-shirt on and studs in his ears, and it was obvious to me that he had a dog, little poodle on a thing. It was obvious to me that the Jesus T-shirt was a fashion item. It wasn't a religious item, and that was what sparked the line about the sexy pants and a sausage dog. And yeah, so we didn't think about it too much, but it was just a kind of an acknowledgement in the verses that my son might come up to me and ask me what I thought about the concept of God, and I hadn't really figured it out since I was at school. I couldn't tell him what I would have believed when I was a kid, but I couldn't, and you know, we were just talking about that, and the lyrics sprung out of that.